Well, guys, I ain't gonna lie to you. It was a busy weekend this weekend, and that's when we do most of our shooting for the show. Is on a Saturday and a Sunday. That's when Declan and I find time to do it. And this weekend was too busy. Couldn't get to it. But I'm also feeling a little bit of the anxiety and the sort of panicky flop sweat that's coming along with the reality that I'm about to take Declan to go get his learner's permit, or at least get ID'd for his learner's permit on this Friday. And his engine is still sitting here. I'm leaning on it. We got to get moving on it. So even though he is tied up and can't help me, and normally I would like to have him run through all of this stuff with me, I got to keep moving. So we're going to do a couple of things on this motor tonight here as we sit, and hopefully get this thing just a little bit closer to getting buttoned up. Now, in fairness, I still have the oil pump to change out. And before I can do that, I'm waiting on a couple of parts. So I do have a new oil pump to put in here. It's a high output or high volume oil pump. But I'm waiting on the screen, and I'm waiting on the hold down that's going to hold that screen in place so it doesn't fall off like this one did. They are prone to doing that if you can't lock them in place. It's just a press fit, so eventually that press fit will get loose and it'll fall out of there. So once those things come, I can get this part of it buttoned up. But in the meantime, I did want to take care of a couple other things tonight if I can. One of them is to change out the rear main seal on this thing. I do not know for a fact that it's bad, but I'm guessing it is. While we've got it this far apart, we might as well. No harm, no foul in doing that. And it came with the kit that I had, the gasket and seal kit that I bought. The other piece that we're going to do is the timing chain. So we've got a new timing kit that I managed to get from Advance Auto on their sort of closeout deal, like 24 bucks. Got myself a new timing chain set. So we're going to be installing that as well as the timing chain gaskets to put the cover back on. So we'll get a couple of those things done tonight, hopefully, and move forward. So as long as I don't lose any parts down this motor, this one should go pretty quick. What we have to do first here is take off this oil pump. Getting off this oil pump is going to allow us access to this main cap, so we're going to go ahead and get a socket to get that off. There we go. That's on there tight. Definitely going to have to get torque specs on that when we put it back on, because that was not 35 foot-pounds. All right, so that is off. Just need a little bit of leverage to break these free. There we go. Now we should be able to get in here with a regular ratchet. Yeah. All right, so we'll take these two bolts out. Set them off to the side. And then more than likely, we're going to have to knock this bad boy around to get these out. Yeah. Try the dead blow here, see if I can get it. Yep, I took it off pretty easily. Okay. So we're going to take a look at the bearings here. you guys can get a good look at those. We come over. So there's definitely wear. I don't see big scores. Given what we're doing with this motor, I think we are probably going to just go ahead and push this guy back in. I don't think we're going to worry about this too much. I talked about it on here a few times before, that this motor is a strong motor, it's a good motor, and we'll do more with it later. For right now, I'm more concerned about just getting this thing ready and putting it back into the car so that we can get it running and driving for Declan. I'm much less concerned with making it perfect. So as long as there's nothing just horribly broke, we're going to go ahead and just try to spruce it up as best as we can. But in this case, I'm not going to mess with bearings unless I'm seeing something really wrong. And since I'm not seeing anything really wrong there and just seeing some wear, I think we're going to go ahead and do this thing rather than take that extra time to go through and do a bearing set here. So I reserve the right to change my mind in the future, but for right now, that's what I'm thinking. So let's go ahead and set ourselves to work on this rear main seal. So this is a two-piece rear main seal. And you can see in this main cap, this is one of the bearings, one of the seals, one side of it. So this is the top half, or actually technically the bottom half, and the other half is set inside there. So we really just need to chase this guy out, and he should come out pretty easily. And then the only other one that's kind of a pain to take out is going to be the one that's actually sitting underneath the crank inside the motor. Ever so gently get this thing started, and I want to get it started from the outside. Here we go. I do not want to pick at the actual surface that this is going to ride on. There we go, popped right out. All right, so we're going to spray this up, clean it up a little bit, so that we have a clean mating surface for our new main seals. This actually didn't look bad. I don't think we had a bad main seal. So this is a full Felpro gasket set. This is the smaller set. I forget what it didn't come with. Valve seals. Didn't come with the valve seals. But this does come with our rear main seals. Comes with some exhaust gaskets as well. Valve cover gaskets. The whole shebang, and our rear main seals are inside here. All right, so this is our crankshaft right here. And you can see right here, this little gray piece right at my fingertip, that is the other half of the rear main seal. So it gets tucked down in there. Now you do not have to remove the whole crankshaft to get that out of there. That's going to slide out, and our new one is going to slide in. They even give you a little plastic tool to make sure that your new seal doesn't get scuffed up on this piece of metal when you're sliding it in. So the important part here is you don't want to use metal pieces to get this job done, because you don't want to mar up your crank. So the trick is going to be in me making this happen smoothly. I'm going to need two hands. Well, it feels like that seal wants to sort of come apart. So even though it's not the ideal view for you guys, let me see if I can get a better handle on it from over here. Plus, if I'm being selfish here, this is right in front of the heater where I'm standing, so that's not such a bad spot for me. Okay, I'm going to be very careful here with the metal tool. Try to give you a view. I want to just try to break this seal free, like so. Just get a little separation on it from the metal it's basically attached to and been riding on for God knows how long. But I want to be careful with the pick not to jab it into the crankshaft. So you do want to be careful when you're working with this. You don't want to mar the crank. Anything you do that's going to mar this crank is going to open up the potential for leaks moving forward. That wouldn't be good. We don't want that. Because this thing really wasn't leaking to start with, or at least if it was, it wasn't by much. So there's no sense in introducing new ones, since this thing is supposed to keep leaks from happening. There we go. All right, you see what just happened there? Hopefully you did. By pushing down on this, it's moving this side up. We've probably reached the end of what this piece can do. All right, found a plastic pick I may be able to use. Closer. Never fails, every video you watch, people taking this stuff out, it just slides right out. Not me though. There we go. Need a little leverage. So it's a pretty stiff part, so it wants to curl around. It doesn't want to just yank out of there. But we got it. Interestingly, I'm seeing what looks like kind of a score on the crankshaft here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this shiny line here, and I don't know, I'm going to guess it's not supposed to be there. I'm going to have to look that up. But it doesn't look like it should be there. And it's right where the seal would go. Maybe it's something got into that seal, inrode in there, and carved it up a little bit. Not sure. The rest of the crank looks okay.
As it turns out, this is pretty common. It turns out that a lot of crankshafts get scored up this way from these rubber seals. I'm presuming that it's because some debris and stuff gets caught in between the rubber and the crankshaft, rather than the idea that rubber is actually wearing away at steel. But it's pretty common, and there's some sleeves and things like that you can do to fix it. But most people report that even with that groove, it really doesn't cause any leaks or any problems. So we're just running with it.
So what they're going to give you in this kit is 2 pieces for the rear main seal. Again, that is if you've got a 2-piece rear main seal like we do. The other thing they're going to give us is this little tab, which is going to look like a throwaway piece that they put in here by accident. It's not. It's there on purpose. We'll go through that later when we get ready for it. Now what they tell you is that the large piece, the large lip needs to go towards the front of the motor. So if we know this is the way our cap sits on here, this is how this is going to go in. So easy enough. We just set it in place. What we want to try to do is get one side a little bit longer than the other, so that the seam where the seal is meeting doesn't line up perfectly with this, right? The idea would be that if this seal is off center from where these 2 mating surfaces are, it's just one less place where you're going to have the potential for a leak. Why did they give us this little thing, you may ask? Or you should ask, anyway. It's because of this little piece of metal. This little piece right here, if you're not careful, is going to scrape up your seal as you put it in place. So the idea, again, we're going to get the heavy part, big part of the lip facing the front of the motor. Then we're going to set this down in place over that piece, and then we're going to start sliding this in place. And that's it. It's in. So we're going to put a little bit of this in here. Not a lot. Don't need to go crazy. All right, looks like we're well seated in there. This is a tight fit, so as you're putting this in, you do want to be careful that it's registered and it's seated down in there and it's flush. And it looks like we got it this time. Check our torque specs, tighten this up, and move on. Well, the interweb hath answered to get another query. They say between 95 and 105 foot-pounds. So what I'm going to do is go to 50 on each one and then go back and step it up. We are good there. All right, so we're all torqued out there. Everything looks good from this side. No copious amounts of the RTV squishing through on the outside of this. So that tells me we got the right amount. We didn't do too much. All right, so that gets us complete here. So we're set for what we needed to do with the rear main seal. The next thing we can move on to is a timing chain. These weren't in here tight because we already took this off to paint the motor. But they were on enough to make it more than finger tight. Finger tight, that is. More than finger tight. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to remove these bolts from the timing chain. I've already done this once before taking this off, but now we're going to take it off for realsies. I took it off once before to see if I could identify the camshaft through some markings that might be on the end of the camshaft. I can't, and I don't have the tools or equipment to be able to identify the camshaft by measuring lift or the cam angles or anything like that. So I'm not gonna. And we're just going to focus on getting this guy off, and we'll just change this out. So this ought to be a relatively easy thing for us to take off and to replace. And partially that's because this is all timed and it's all geared. So we are taking off one set and replacing it with a like set. So I've actually gone ahead and taken a look at this. This timing set, literally the same markings, same numbers, same GM numbers as what we have on this set. It's still a double roller timing chain set. So we're really just doing this because we're in here, and we might as well, because why not while we're here. But I do not think we are actually desperate to do this. I think it was actually okay. I took some measurements off of it, and it wasn't shamefully loose. So technically I don't think we have to take this off, but we're gonna, because why not? I did measure the slack that this thing takes up when it's loose. It was like 1/4 of an inch, which is, from what I read, within the spec. Now you're gonna see, when you look at these, there is a dot right there. That dot's going to be stamped right into the cog, right into that gear. There's going to be another one that's going to be stamped into this lower gear. And then this gear is on a woodruff, it's on a keyway. So it's only going to go on really in one dimension, one way. So I'm not terribly sure how many ways this thing can go on. But just to make sure, I'm going to make a mark on the key slot that matches up to the one that's on here right now, because we want to just do like for like. We're not looking to change anything. Well, after sort of an embarrassing amount of searching, I managed to find the puller that I was looking for. It was actually in my older toolbox that I keep in the other room. But this is what we need to pull this bottom sprocket off. So hopefully you guys can see what I'm about to do here. So first off, this piece, I don't have all the attachments for this. I really just have this one piece. Normally there'd be attachments for here to make this point a little bit bigger. What we don't want to do is jam this inside the threads inside the crank snout. So I've got an old fender washer off of a shock. That's going to do the trick for us. It'll keep us still centered on this snout, but off of this enough so that we won't mar it up. And once we hook that on there, we'll just tighten this up slowly until it wants to stay there on its own, and then I'll grab my wrench. We're on there pretty good. I would definitely advise the old safety googles on this one, because hopefully this comes off easy, but if this slips, then we could be in trouble. There we go, felt a push. A little pop did it. It's not quite ready to come off fully yet. It wants to. There we go. There we go. And she's off. I say she looks a little beaten. Like maybe someone did not put her on with care and tenderness. The whole snout looks that way too, so I'm going to guess this has been off before and nobody's taken the care to put this thing on properly. So I'm just going to check and make sure that this doesn't just slide right over. It doesn't. Good. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a little science. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat this up with a torch. And get this thing a bit warmer, and then carefully with a pair of gloves, I'm going to slide this on. Temperature difference between the two, this metal expanding, this metal pretty cold at room temperature here in the garage, should mean that this slides right on, and then once it cools off, it'll just be trapped. I don't hate this activity in a cold garage. It's a little warm. It's kind of nice. There it is. Right on. So there we go. We got them warm enough, and he just slid right on. All right, it's coolio. Magic, guys. Science works. So we just got that hot enough and expanded that metal, and it went straight on. Bingo. And we've got it right on our keyway that we marked, which is exactly how we had the last one on. So we should be in the right spots. Good to go. And so now it's time to get the chain and the cogs on. Take a look at these keyways. And you can look right on the manufacturer's box for this and it'll tell you the deal. So we replaced this exactly how it was with the old crankshaft, with the old sprocket that was on here. So we went with this square keyway. There's also a keyway that has sort of a round to it. That's this one. And there's another keyway here that has sort of an arrow shape to it. That's down here underneath. Which one of those keyways you choose determines whether you're going to set up your camming timing retarded or advanced or dead up like the factory would have set. The square is what we chose. That's what we had. That's the factory setting. So that's 0 timing. In order to match the mark that we have on that larger crank wheel, that's the camshaft gear, we need to get the right mark on this sprocket to coincide with it. So if we're using the square keyway, we use the mark that looks like a square. That's this one. If you were to use the one that looks like a little triangle, or comes to a little point here, then you would use the triangle, the arrowhead. And then there's a circle over here for the one that looks like it's rounded. So we're going to try to match up those lines. So it'll be this square mark or rectangular mark lined up with the dot that we put on our cam. So I moved these independently, but I'm pretty confident that I got things right. Here's why I'm confident I got things right. I had to take a second and do the mental math. I got my lines lined up. There's a keyway on the snout, so I know I got this cog in the right place. There's a, I don't know what you call these. It's effectively a keyway. It's a dowel pin on the camshaft that traps the sprocket up top, so I know I got that in the right spot. Those can't be wrong. My dots are lined up, pointed right at each other, 6 and 12. So I know that that's correct. Also, when I look inside my valley, I can see my lifters on cylinder number 1, which is right here, are both closed. So both of those valves, the lifters are down, which means the valves are closed. And if the valves are closed, that means we are on the compression stroke, top dead center of the number 1 cylinder. So we should be good. Now, we just gotta get the chain hooked up. All right, so now with that off, take the gear off, get our roller chain. And now this is just a matter of getting this thing into the right position, getting the teeth in the right spot so I can hook onto this dowel pin. There you go. Not too shabby. Let's get ourselves tightened here. So that's it. You guys are crooked. We're all crooked, I guess. But that's it. Well, that about does it for me for tonight, because it's late. It's about 10 o'clock. God knows this needs as much beauty sleep as it can get. Can't look forward to let it get any worse. So I'm going to head off to bed. This thing is going to wait until tomorrow. We'll get some new Permatex for silicone or RTV to be able to put on the gaskets for the timing chain cover. And then we should be good with that. And then we'll see about getting this top cleaned and actually getting the intake plopped on tomorrow. And then that should get us done for this week on this engine. And then the last piece is just waiting for the pickup screen and the mount to arrive. And once those come in, we can throw those on and get the oil pan on. And then this engine itself will be pretty much ready to go into Declan's car. And then we just got to worry about making sure that we get the transmission, flywheel starter, stuff like that ready to go. But we're getting close. We're getting real close. Well, another day, another donut, another task. So I did go out and get some of the RTV so that we can finish this job. We're going to put the timing chain cover on, and that means we got the material that we need to put the gaskets on. But before we can do that, we've got to change out the seal that's in here. This is the seal that goes around the crankshaft snout. We've got a new one in our kit, our Felpro kit. So we're going to go ahead and change this one out. First things first, I'm going to tear this one out of there, and then we'll punch the new one in. Well, pardon the mess here, but it happens. We're getting a little bit sloppy here again, so there's stuff out everywhere. That's what happens when we're doing 50 million projects at once. So what I want to do here is take this piece out. I'm not going to jab in here with a screwdriver because I don't want to tear up this piece. So what I'm going to try to do is just punch down at this way. And let's see if we can just kind of gently tap here. I don't know how much it's going to take. Probably not a lot. That's it. That came out relatively easily. Not too bad. All right, so let's run a rag through here. We'll just clean this up and make sure we don't have any debris left in here. Nice and clean, hunky-dory. And then we have our new one to punch in place. So we'll just set this in, and I want to get this in even. And part of getting stuff like this in even means striking it evenly, so I'm going to grab something to distribute my force. I'm always a big fan of cutoffs like this. These are the kinds of things that your wife is going to yell at you for because you got random blocks of wood around, but for stuff like this, they really come in handy. There we go. Sit nice and flush. See? Purdy. On to the next step. Good news is we did not have a leak in this before, so we were in pretty good shape. I'm not too worried about this being twisted up or giving us leak problems, so we should be all right. So what we want to be able to do here is get the gasket in place here, and then be able to put this in place over it. We're going to see once we finally have this in place, there is going to be another seal. We'll put this on when the oil pan goes on. It's going to run around this rib on the inside, but that'll be for later once we get this on. For now, we're just going to worry about getting this gasket seal on here. We're going to leave off the water pump seals. Those will come on later. What we've got here, little Permatex. This is the gray stuff. You just want to make sure that the stuff you're using has got some level of heat resistance, but also oil resistance, because that's what this is going to be up against all the time is the oil. We'll use our little cap to make our impression. Open that up. We are going to use our little snout here for now. And what I want to do is just going to put a little bead of this. First, I'm going to sort of test fit this. Just give myself a marker for where everything is going to go, because I am going to put a little bead of silicone around here. And this is mostly just to make sure that we get good adhesion, and I can stick this thing on and it's not going to go anywhere. We're not going to put a lot on here, and we're probably going to smear it in a little bit with our finger. The gasket's going to be doing most of the work, but I want to just get some of the silicone on here to give it a hand, a little assistance. So just put a little bit of this stuff on. I do not want to be gooping so much of this stuff on that it's squirting out. We do not need that. This is not going to be like a thick bead that you're going to put around like on the china wall. We don't need that nonsense. Just enough to get us a little sticking power. That's plenty. Just sort of smear this in to make sure we get a nice seating. And this is going to help us keep this gasket in place as we put it on and then put the chiming chain cover on. There you go. You get these little guide pins, which are a nice opportunity to get us guided in place. Just make sure our holes are lined up. We're sitting flat with the gasket. We don't have any sort of weird wonkiness or twists. Everybody's sitting pretty flat. Now we're going to go for some more of ye old RTV. All right, clean that goopy stuff off. Just because you're wearing gloves doesn't mean you don't have to clean off your hands. All right, so we're going to slide this guy on again. We're going to use our dowel pins to get everything registered. Here we go. Get ourselves a couple of bolts in place. So we have a few components here that we're using as part of this system. We've got our pump, which is this bad boy right here. We've got our pickup screen, we've got our drive shaft, and we've got this little Pioneer part, which I'll put a link in the description for those of you who might be interested in this guy. This is a mechanical lock to hold our pickup screen in place, and we'll get to more on that in a second. First thing I'm going to do is just make sure I can test fit this pump and make sure it slides over the dowel pins that are there. And thankfully it does. So you can see, and actually, let me pick up my my mobile camera. That's you guys. All right, so you can see here, this is our main cap. This is what we took off the other day to replace the main seal. And there are these two dowel pins. If you're not careful, or if somebody before you has not been careful, these things can be missing or banged up, and that can cause you to have some problems putting the pump on or getting the pump off. Fortunately, I had no problem getting the pump off. I just checked this new pump. It slid right on, registers on cleanly, and they look like they're fine, so we're good there. So we should be fine for fit. So that piece is just going to squarely sit right on here, like so, no problems. Now, this piece poking out there with the slot in it, that is our drive shaft. So that is actually what is going to be turning, that's going to be making this pump. And that's going to be driven off of the camshaft, basically. And that's going to be driving through. That's actually the same shaft that's going to be driving the distributor. Now, that runs off of this intermediate piece. So this is going to slide in like so. And then this piece is going to slide onto it. Now, you can, and probably should, get a brand new one of these pieces. But in our case, we're going to use the existing one. The reason why we're going to use the existing is this is a solid piece. This isn't one of the cheapies. The cheapy ones of these actually have a plastic bushing up here and a plastic pin inside. This is not. This is the metal pin variety with the metal bushing. So this is, the same kind of piece that we'd actually replace it with. So we're going to go ahead and reuse that piece. This is our pickup screen, which will get placed like so. This is what is actually going to sit in your oil pan and pick up oil from your oil pan and pump it through the pump and into the engine, or up through the engine. So that's what we're working on. So first things first is we're going to install this pump, get that done first. All right, this should be a relatively simple operation. We're just going to register this drive shaft inside there. Slide that whole operation down into place like so. And then thread this bolt. We're just reusing the same bolt. There's no real reason to do anything different. We'll slide this down in. You don't put any sort of gasketing material or any sort of silicone or anything. This is just a dry fit. There it is, 65. Easy peasy. So that's it, she's locked in place. That's pretty simple. All right, now we need to start installing our pickup. Now the trick with installing this pickup is that first, it wedges in here pretty tight. So we're gonna have to do a little bit of a job of banging this guy in here. We'll have to muscle that in a little bit. The second piece is that we are going to have to put this mount on here. And I believe that's going to have to mount this way. Let's get that going. So we're going to get a rubber mallet. I am not looking to beat this into submission. I'm just looking to get it in there. I don't want to break anything. But we do need to persuade it in place. Changed my mind about that piece. It came off just fine, went on just fine, so. And it was bothering me. Son of a gun. Where'd you go? twice as inverted. So unlike my debacle with the transmission, what I hoped would happen did happen, and I managed to find the screw hanging out on the floor. So it was not sitting in the engine. There we go. All right, so now that is in. We still have to tighten down this bracket right here to hold this thing in place. Quite frankly, even just the way it is right now, it's not going anywhere, but that bolt will have to get tightened down so it doesn't shake loose. And the whole reason that we're putting us on here is because we had a problem with this screen before, and it's a common problem, at least in these Chevy motors, where because this is a press fit over time, this will work itself loose. And once it works itself loose, it's going to just pop right off. And in fact, when we pulled this out of our engine, when we took the pan off, this was loose inside the pan. It had fallen off. And what happens there is when it gets loose, it'll swing back and forth. And what can happen is as you come to stops or as you accelerate, this can move and swing up and down in the pan. That can cause it to sort of lose contact with the oil in the sump in the bottom of the pan. And when that happens, you can lose oil pressure. That's what I was having a problem with in this motor in the Chevelle, is if I would come to a hard stop, if someone stopped abruptly in front of me or a light turned red suddenly, and I had to sort of jam on the brakes and come to a sudden stop, this oil pickup would swing out. I would lose oil pressure because the fluid in the pan would swing to the front of the pan instead of back to the sump. This thing would come out of the oil, and my oil pressure would drop down to like 5 pounds. Once I started moving again, this thing would swing back in place, the oil would slosh back into the sump, and my oil pressure would go right back up again. But it was quite alarming. So we're going to put this lock on here to make sure that this does not come off again and that it holds its position. But first, we're going to set the position in the pan. All right, so the way we're going to try this out and get this thing positioned is we are going to go ahead and lay in place our gaskets. We're not going to put these hard in place yet. We're just going to lay them in. And we're not even worried about exactly where they go because we're not bonding them in place. We're just kind of laying them in. We're going to twist this up to make sure that it's definitely going to hit the pan. And then we're going to lay this pan down. So it's hitting. Now we're going to press the pan down gently. All right, now our pan is sitting down firmly. So this is how it would be sitting in the car once it's in place. Now we'll just gently pull this up. Move that off to the side. We'll get our gaskets out of the way so we don't muck them up. Okay. Because this thing is not sitting level. About 7.5. Yeah, that's about it. So now we're sitting right about where I want it to. So now it's time to tighten this nut down. So it turns out this is a 7/16 nut, just in case anybody was questioning. So we're tightening this down to sort of clamp around this tube It should not move once we're there. Hopefully, ever. That's it. Not going nowhere. That's on there solid. Now, unfortunately, I got to stop there because I'm at a loss for two reasons. The first is that I do not have the intake bolts to be able to mount the intake, and I'm not going to go ahead and put the silicone on there and get it in place if I don't have the bolts to be able to mount it in place and make sure that it's registered. And the second piece is that upon inspecting this oil pan to be able to put it back on, I'm not digging it. It's pretty banged up, and it's banged up around the creases, around the seal where it would actually mount back up to the motor. And it also looks like somebody has cut the baffle out of it. It's got sharp edges to it. So for the money it's going to cost to get a new oil pan, I think I'm just going to go out and get a new oil pan for this one and put that on. So since that's not here, I'm going to hold off on putting on the gaskets and seals for the oil pan as well. So those are two things that we'll catch up on and do those later on. But other than that, we're pretty well caught up now on this engine. So you saw us put on timing chain cover and gaskets, and the new oil pump and oil pump pickup screen. And so this motor is that much closer to getting ready to going back into the car, which is getting me happier. We're getting closer to the place where we can throw this thing back in, and we are getting more and more parts ready to be able to get all of these things back together and into the car, so that we can get running for spring. Because even though we got back-to-back storms rolling in here, with dumping snow and winter ice and sleet on us, I still know that the car season is just around the corner, and I hate the idea of not being ready for cars. So this episode will be coming out this week. The day that this episode is coming out, Declan should be applying for his learner's permit. So with any amount of luck, his first driving lessons are actually going to be this weekend. So stay tuned for that. We'll be talking a little bit more about that the next time you see us. And hopefully we'll catch you again soon. And until then, you'll be throwing wrenches. Thanks, guys. We'll see you real soon.